The fading afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Trinidad, Colorado, when Abigail Jameson received the news that would change her life forever. Her husband of 8 years, Thomas Jameson, had been killed in a mining accident outside town, leaving her alone with a small ranch to manage and a 6-year-old son to raise. "Mrs. Jameson, I'm deeply sorry," Sheriff Donovan said, his hat clutched in weathered hands as he stood on her porch. The collapse was sudden. They couldn't get to him in time. Abigail stood frozen, her knuckles white as she gripped the doorframe. At 26, she had never imagined widowhood, never prepared for the crushing weight that now settled on her chest. Behind her, she could hear her son Elliot playing, blissfully unaware that his father would never return. "Thank you for coming personally, Sheriff," she managed, her voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling in her limbs. It was April 1878, and spring had barely begun to touch the rugged landscape surrounding Trinidad. As the sheriff departed with a respectful nod, Abigail closed the door and leaned against it, fighting to keep her composure. How would she tell Elliot? How would she manage the ranch? Thomas had handled everything: the finances, the decisions, the future. The burial took place 2 days later under a crisp blue sky that seemed cruelly indifferent to Abigail's suffering. Neighbors and townspeople came to pay their respects, offering condolences and promises of help that Abigail knew would fade as time passed. Trinidad was a bustling frontier town, but people had their own struggles, their own lives to manage. It was Mrs. Whitaker, the shopkeeper's wife, who brought her the box a week after the funeral. "They found this in Thomas's office at the mining company," she explained, handing Abigail a wooden box roughly the size of a large book. "His personal effects." Abigail thanked her and, once alone, opened it with trembling fingers. Inside lay Thomas's pocket watch, a small leather-bound notebook filled with calculations, and tied with string, a bundle of letters, her letters. She untied the string and spread them before her on the kitchen table. Every letter she had written to Thomas over the past year when he had taken the job at the mine. Letters filled with news of their son, the ranch, her loneliness, her love. Each one still sealed, unread. Abigail's hands shook as understanding dawned. Thomas had never read a single one. Not her accounts of Elliot's first day at school. Not her descriptions of the new calf born in early spring. Not her words of love and longing. That night, after putting Elliot to bed with a story about his father's bravery, Abigail sat on the porch and wept until her chest ached and her eyes burned. The realization that Thomas had distanced himself long before his death stung worse than the loss itself. Had he stopped loving her? Had the marriage that she'd cherished been nothing but obligation to him? Morning came with no answers, only the harsh reality that regardless of Thomas's feelings, she had a ranch to run and a child to raise. Trinidad might have been growing with the railroad's expansion, but a woman alone still faced nearly insurmountable challenges. Within a month, Abigail realized that the ranch was in far worse financial shape than she'd known. Thomas had borrowed heavily against their property, investing in mining ventures that had yielded little return. The bank was sympathetic but firm. She had until autumn to make good on the debts or lose everything. "You could sell now," Mr. Harrington at the bank suggested. "There are buyers interested in this land. You'd have enough to start fresh somewhere else." But Abigail refused. This land was Elliot's inheritance, the only home he'd ever known. She would find a way. They brought unexpected help in the form of Cole Rowland, a cowboy passing through on his way north to Wyoming. He'd stopped at her ranch asking for work, having heard in town that the widowed Mrs. Jameson might need help with spring calving. "I can't pay much," Abigail warned him, studying the tall stranger with wary eyes. He stood before her with his hat in his hands, respectful but direct in his gaze. At perhaps 30 years old, his face was weathered by sun and wind, but his blue eyes held a quiet intelligence that put her slightly at ease. "Room and board is payment enough for now, madam," he replied. "I'm headed north eventually, but I'm in no hurry." Against her better judgment, or perhaps because of the desperate circumstances, Abigail hired him. Cole proved to be a godsend. He worked from dawn until dusk, mending fences, tending cattle, and fixing the barn roof that had leaked all winter. He was quiet but kind, especially with Elliot, who followed him around the ranch like a shadow. "My pa used to be a foreman for a cattle operation in Texas," Cole explained one evening as they sat on the porch after Elliot had gone to bed. "Taught me everything about ranching before he passed." "What brought you this far north?" Abigail asked, curious about this man who had appeared when she needed help most. Cole's expression darkened slightly. "The war changed things in Texas. Too many bad memories. I've been working my way north ever since, taking jobs where I can find them." Abigail nodded, understanding loss when she saw it. "Well, I'm grateful you stopped in Trinidad." As May turned to June, the ranch began to show signs of recovery under Cole's capable management. He'd suggested selling off a small parcel of land to pay the most pressing debts, while implementing changes that would make the remaining acreage more profitable. Abigail found herself relying on his judgment more and more. One evening, as Abigail was sorting through Thomas's papers in a final attempt to understand their financial situation, Cole found her at the kitchen table surrounded by documents, her face drawn with worry. "Mrs. James and Abigail, there's something I've been meaning to ask you," he said, his usual confidence seemingly diminished. She looked up, brushing a strand of auburn hair from her face. "Yes. I noticed you writing letters most evenings. If you'd like, I'm heading into town tomorrow. I could post them for you." Abigail felt heat rise to her cheeks. He'd seen her writing. Since discovering Thomas's unread letters, she'd taken to writing again each night, not to her deceased husband, but to herself, pouring out her fears, hopes, and struggles onto paper as a way to make sense of her new reality. "They're not for sending," she admitted. "Just thoughts I need to get out." Cole nodded, then surprised her by saying, "I understand. After my mother died, my father wrote to her every day for a year, said it helped him feel less alone." The simple understanding in his words brought unexpected tears to Abigail's eyes. "Thomas never read my letters," she confessed suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I found them after he died, still sealed." Cole's expression shifted from surprise to something deeper, anger perhaps on her behalf. "Then he was a fool," he said quietly. The words hung between them, bold and honest. "I should apologize for speaking ill of your husband," Cole added after a moment. Abigail shook her head. "No, perhaps you're right. There was much about Thomas I never truly knew." Their conversation was interrupted by Elliot calling from upstairs, awakened by a bad dream. As Abigail rose to comfort her son, Cole surprised her by saying, "If you ever want someone to read your letters, I'd be honored. Or better yet, I could write back." The offer, made with such simple sincerity, stayed with Abigail as she soothed Elliot back to sleep. It had been so long since anyone had shown interest in her thoughts, her words. The next morning, Abigail made a decision. After Cole left to check the north pasture, she took a fresh sheet of paper and wrote not to herself, but to him. A proper letter detailing her thoughts about the ranch, her concerns about the coming harvest, her gratitude for his help. Nothing too personal, but honest nonetheless. She left it on the kitchen table with his name written on the folded paper. By evening, when Cole returned, the letter was gone. They ate dinner together with Elliot, discussing the day's work, but neither mentioned the letter. Abigail wondered if he'd read it at all, or if he'd thought better of his offer. Her answer came the following morning. On the kitchen table was a sealed envelope with her name written in a surprisingly elegant hand. Inside was a letter from Cole, a real letter, 2 pages long, responding to her concerns with thoughtful advice about the ranch, but also sharing stories of his own travels, his observations about Trinidad and its people, even a funny anecdote about a stubborn mule he'd once owned. It ended simply, "If you wish to continue this correspondence, I'll write you every day. Even though we share the same roof, sometimes it's easier to say things on paper than face to face. Respectfully yours, Cole. And so began their unusual arrangement. Each day, they would exchange letters, Abigail writing in the evening after Elliot was asleep, Cole responding by morning. They maintained their normal interactions during the day, working side by side to save the ranch, but through their letters, a deeper connection formed. Abigail wrote of her marriage to Thomas, how they'd met when she was just 17, and he was an ambitious 22-year-old with dreams of building an empire in the West. She confessed her loneliness during the final years when Thomas grew increasingly distant, spending more time at the mines than at home. Cole, in turn, revealed his own past, his service in the Confederate Army, a decision he'd come to regret, the loss of his family farm after the war, his years drifting from Texas through New Mexico territory, and now into Colorado. He wrote of his dream to someday have land of his own again, a place to put down roots. By July, their daily letters had become longer, more personal. Abigail found herself watching the clock each evening, eager for the moment when Elliot would be asleep, and she could sit down to read Cole's latest letter and compose her response. "You have a glow about you lately," observed Hannah Miller, her closest friend in Trinidad, when Abigail came to town for supplies. "Is the ranch doing better?" "Yes," Abigail replied, not mentioning Cole or their letters. "We've managed to pay off some of the debt, and the summer calves are strong." Hannah studied her with knowing eyes. "And your new ranch hand, Mr. Rowland, isn't it? The whole town's talking about him." Abigail felt herself blush. "He's been invaluable. I couldn't have managed without his help." Hannah murmured. "Just be careful, Abby. People talk, and it's been barely 3 months since Thomas passed." The reminder brought a familiar guilt. Was it disrespectful to Thomas's memory that she looked forward to Cole's letters with such anticipation? That she sometimes found herself watching him as he worked, admiring not just his capability, but the way the sun brought out gold highlights in his brown hair. That night, Abigail's letter to Cole was shorter than usual. She mentioned the ranch business, Elliot's progress with his reading, but avoided the personal reflections that had become a feature of their correspondence. Cole noticed immediately. His response the next morning was direct. "I sense a change in your words. If I've overstepped or made you uncomfortable in any way, please tell me. The last thing I want is to add to your burdens." Abigail stared at his letter, feeling a complex mix of emotions. In the 3 months since Thomas's death, Cole had become essential not just to the ranch's survival, but to her own sense of hope for the future. Yet Hannah's warning echoed in her mind. She decided honesty was the only way forward. That evening she wrote, "Dear Cole, I was reminded yesterday that it has been only a short time since I became a widow, and that our arrangement, these letters, your presence here might seem inappropriate to others. I find myself torn between what society expects of me as a grieving widow and what my heart tells me is right. The truth is, these letters have become precious to me. Your words have helped me through the darkest period of my life. But I worry about Elliot, about the ranch, about what people in town might say. Perhaps we should end this correspondence, at least for now. Yours, Abigail." She left the letter on the table and went to bed with a heavy heart, certain that she was doing the right thing but feeling the loss already. Morning brought no response from Cole. The letter was gone from the table, but no envelope had replaced it. Abigail went about her day with a hollow feeling in her chest, avoiding Cole's eyes when their paths crossed in the barn or at the corral. That evening, instead of finding a letter waiting for her, she found Cole himself sitting at the kitchen table after Elliot had gone to bed. "I thought we should talk face to face," he said, his expression serious. "May I?" Abigail nodded, taking the seat opposite him. "I understand your concerns," Cole began, "and I respect them. If you want me to leave—" "No," Abigail interrupted, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. "That's not what I want at all." "What do you want, Abigail?" Cole asked quietly. The direct question caught her off guard. What did she want? Safety and security for Elliot, certainly. The ranch saved from creditors, but beyond that. I want to stop feeling guilty for being alive when Thomas isn't, she admitted. For discovering that my husband had emotionally abandoned me long before his death. For finding comfort in your words, in your presence. Cole listened intently, his blue eyes never leaving her face. There's no shame in any of that, he said when she'd finished. Grief isn't simple, neither is moving forward. The town will talk, Abigail said. They'll say it's too soon, that I'm disrespecting Thomas's memory. And what does your heart say? The question hung between them, bold and challenging. Abigail took a deep breath. My heart says that life is too short and too uncertain to deny genuine connection when it appears, she said finally. My heart says that Thomas made his choice when he set my letters aside unread, and that I deserve someone who values my words, my thoughts. A slow smile spread across Cole's face. Then I'll keep writing if you'll let me, every day, and as for the town, let them talk. We know the truth of what's between us. What exactly was between them, Abigail wasn't quite ready to name, but as Cole bid her good night and left her to her thoughts, she felt lighter than she had in months. She took out paper and pen and began to write. Their correspondence continued through the summer, growing deeper and more honest with each exchange. Through his letters, Abigail came to know Cole as a man of principle and integrity, someone who'd made mistakes but had learned from them, who approached life with a quiet determination she admired. For his part, Cole's letters revealed his growing admiration for Abigail's resilience, her devotion to Elliot, her unwillingness to surrender the ranch despite overwhelming odds. He wrote of watching her face light up when she laughed, how her strength inspired him to be a better man. By August, the ranch's situation had improved enough that Abigail could see a path to keeping it. Cole had introduced her to cattle buyers from Denver who offered fair prices, and his knowledge of breeding stock helped her make decisions that would improve their herd for years to come. Elliot, too, had thrived with Cole's influence. The boy who had been subdued and confused after his father's death now ran eagerly to help with chores, proudly showing off the riding skills Cole had patiently taught him. One evening, Abigail overheard her son ask Cole if he was going to be his new father. Cole's response was careful but kind. That's a decision for your mama to make someday when she's ready, but no matter what happens, you and I will always be friends. The exchange, which Elliot innocently reported to her later, prompted Abigail to address the future in her next letter to Cole. You've never spoken of your plans beyond helping us through this difficult time, she wrote. Are you still intending to continue north to Wyoming? I realize I've grown accustomed to your presence here, to our letters, to the partnership we've built. Elliot has as well. I find myself dreading the day you might decide it's time to move on. His response came the next morning. Dear Abigail, I've thought often of Wyoming, of the open country there and the possibilities it holds. But increasingly, I find myself thinking of Trinidad as home, not just the town, but this ranch, the life we've been building together. I stayed initially because you needed help. I remain because I've found something I didn't know I was searching for. If you'll have me, not as a hired hand but as a partner in every sense, I'd like to stay. Not just for the ranch or for Elliot, though I've grown to love them both, but for you, Abigail. For the woman whose letters I've come to treasure, whose strength I admire, whose company brings me more joy than I believed possible after the hardships of war. I know it may be too soon to speak of such things. I know there's the memory of Thomas to consider, and Elliot's feelings and the opinions of the town. But I've lived enough to know that when you find something real and true, you don't let it go without a fight. I'll understand if you need time or if your answer is no. But know that whatever you decide, I'll keep my promise. I'll write to you every day for as long as you wish to read my words. Yours always, Cole. Abigail read the letter 3 times, her hands trembling. It was everything she'd hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. Cole was offering her a future, a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection, something she'd never truly had with Thomas despite 8 years of marriage. But was it too soon? Would accepting mean dishonoring Thomas's memory? As she went about her chores that day, Abigail wrestled with these questions, watching Cole interact with Elliot, seeing the gentle guidance he offered, the patience he showed. That evening, after putting Elliot to bed, Abigail found Cole on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "I read your letter," she said, joining him. Cole turned to face her, his expression cautious but hopeful. "And I need to be certain about something," Abigail said, gathering her courage. "Is this what's between us? Is it real? Or is it the circumstances, the shared work, the intimacy of our letters?" Cole considered her question with the thoughtfulness she'd come to expect from him. "I believe it's real," he said finally. "In my 31 years, I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you. The letters allowed me to know your mind, your heart, in a way that might have taken years otherwise. But what I feel would be true regardless of how I came to know you." Abigail nodded, her own heart racing. "I feel the same," she admitted. "But I'm afraid, Cole, afraid of making another mistake, of trusting too quickly, of what people will say." "We don't have to decide everything tonight," Cole assured her, tentatively reaching for her hand. "We can take time, be certain." The touch of his hand on hers sent warmth through Abigail's body. How long had it been since she'd been touched with such tenderness? "I'd like that," she said softly. "Time to be sure." September brought the harvest and the final payment to the bank, ensuring the ranch would remain in Abigail's name. The victory was celebrated with a small gathering of neighbors and friends from town. To Abigail's surprise, most seemed genuinely happy for her success, and few appeared scandalized by Cole's obvious place of importance in the household. "People aren't as judgmental as you feared," Hannah told her as they watched Cole supervising a game of horseshoes with Elliot and some other children. "Most folks in town are just glad you're managing. Times are hard enough without carrying old-fashioned notions about how long a widow should grieve." With the ranch secure, Abigail and Cole continued their daily letters, but also began to share more moments together, openly writing the property boundaries, planning improvements for the coming year, teaching Elliot together. Their growing closeness did not go unnoticed in town, but the predicted scandal never materialized. Trinidad was changing, growing with the railroad's influence, becoming more open-minded than Abigail had given it credit for. By October, their letters had evolved into love letters in earnest. Cole wrote of his dreams for their future, his desire to adopt Elliot legally if Abigail would have him as a husband. Abigail, in turn, confessed her deepening feelings, her gratitude for his patience, her hope for a marriage based on partnership and mutual respect, rather than the inequality she'd known with Thomas. The first frost of autumn had just touched the valley when Cole proposed properly, not in a letter but on a ridge overlooking the ranch, with Elliot as a witness. "I love you both," he said simply, kneeling before them. "I want to build a life with you, to raise Elliot as my son, to face whatever comes together." Elliot, who had been prepared for this moment with a careful conversation the day before, beamed with approval. "Say yes, Mama." Abigail laughed through happy tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it." They were married in November 1878, 7 months after Thomas's death. The ceremony was small but joyful, held in the ranch house with Reverend Matthews officiating and only their closest friends in attendance. Hannah stood as Abigail's witness, while a rancher named James Porter, who had become Cole's friend over the summer, stood up with him. "I never expected to find love again so soon," Abigail confessed to Hannah as she prepared for the ceremony. "Sometimes I still feel guilt about that." "Thomas left you long before he died," Hannah said firmly, adjusting Abigail's new blue dress. "Those unread letters prove it. You have nothing to feel guilty about." The wedding night was both awkward and beautiful, as Cole and Abigail navigated the transition from letters to physical intimacy. Cole was patient and tender, allowing Abigail to set the pace, to discover what pleased her rather than merely submitting as she had often done with Thomas. "I never knew it could be like this," she whispered afterward, cradled in his arms. Cole kissed her forehead. "This is just the beginning, Abby. We have a lifetime to learn each other." Winter settled over Trinidad with heavy snows that isolated the ranch for days at a time. But the Rowland household, for that, was how they thought of themselves, now found joy in the confinement. Evenings were spent reading aloud by the fire, teaching Elliot chess, planning improvements for the ranch when spring came. And still, they wrote to each other. Even sharing a bed and a life, they maintained their daily correspondence, often placing letters on each other's pillows or tucked into coat pockets to be discovered later. Why do we still write when we can simply talk? Abigail asked one snowy evening as they sat by the fire after Elliot had gone to bed. Cole considered the question. There's something special about writing, about taking time to choose your words carefully. And someday, we'll have these letters to look back on, to remember how our love began and grew. Abigail nodded, understanding. Their letters had become more than communication. They were a record of their hearts, a testament to the unexpected love that had blossomed from tragedy. Spring 1879 brought new beginnings to the Rowland Ranch. The cattle thrived under Cole's management, and Abigail discovered she was expecting a child, due in late autumn. Elliot, now 7, was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a big brother and took his new responsibilities seriously, helping Cole with chores beyond his years. Will you still write me letters when the baby comes? Abigail asked Cole one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. Every day, he promised, until we're both too old to hold a pen. Summer passed in a blur of ranch work and preparation for the baby. Cole formally adopted Elliot, a process made easier by the fact that Thomas had no living relatives to contest the arrangement. The boy proudly began introducing himself as Elliot Rowland, taking to his new name with enthusiasm. In September, an unexpected visitor arrived at the ranch, a man named Marcus Webb, who introduced himself as Thomas's former business partner. "I've been out of the country," he explained, standing awkwardly in the parlor. "Just returned to find out about Tom's passing." "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Jameson, or I understand it's Mrs. Rowland now." Abigail, visibly pregnant and with Cole standing protectively beside her, nodded. "Thank you for your condolences, Mr. Webb. What brings you to our home?" Webb shifted uncomfortably. "Well, there's the matter of Thomas's investment in our venture. It actually paid off handsomely after his death. I've come to deliver his share." He produced documentation and a bank draft for an amount that made Abigail's eyes widen. It was enough to clear any remaining debt and expand the ranch considerably. "There's something else," Webb added, reaching into his coat. "Letters. Tom asked me to post these to you when I left for San Francisco last year. I'm ashamed to say I completely forgot until I was going through my things upon return." He handed Abigail a packet of letters tied with string letters from Thomas, dated throughout the last year of his life. After Webb left, Abigail sat at the kitchen table staring at the packet, uncertain whether to open it. "You don't have to read them," Cole said gently. "Not now, not ever." Abigail shook her head. "No, I need to know. Whatever Thomas wrote, it's part of my past." With trembling fingers, she untied the string and opened the first letter. As she read, tears filled her eyes. "He did love me," she whispered. "He explains here why he couldn't read my letters. He felt he'd failed us by taking the mining job, by borrowing against the ranch. He was ashamed to face my words of love when he felt unworthy of them." Cole sat beside her, a steady presence as she read through Thomas's letters that revealed a troubled man caught between ambition and love, a man who'd made mistakes but had genuinely cared for his family. "The last one," Abigail said, her voice catching. "He wrote it the day before the accident. He says he was coming home, that the investment was about to pay off, that he wanted to make everything right between us." Cole took her hand, his expression compassionate. "Does knowing this change anything for you, Abby?" Abigail considered the question carefully, looking from the letters to her husband's face. "It gives me peace," she said finally, "to know that Thomas didn't simply stop caring, that he struggled as I did with our distance." "But no, it doesn't change us, Cole. What we've built together is real and true. These letters are the past. You and Elliot and our baby, you're my future." Cole's relief was evident in his smile. "I'm glad Thomas found a way to tell you what was in his heart, even if it came too late for you both." Abigail nodded, carefully retying the letters. "I'll save these for Elliot for when he's older. He deserves to know his father loved him, even if Thomas didn't always show it well." That night, Abigail wrote a final letter to Thomas, not to be sent but as closure for herself. She wrote of forgiveness, of gratitude for the years they'd shared and for Elliot, of her hope that Thomas had found peace. Then she wrote to Cole, pouring out her heart in gratitude for the man who had taught her that love should include being truly seen and heard, whose daily letters had rebuilt her faith in connection. "You came to us when I thought all was lost," she wrote. "You showed me that being understood is the deepest form of love. Whatever the future holds, I will treasure every word we exchange, every day we share." November brought the birth of their daughter, Catherine Rose Rowland, a healthy baby with Cole's blue eyes and a dusting of auburn hair like her mother's. The delivery was difficult, lasting nearly 2 days, but Cole never left Abigail's side, whispering encouragement and love through her pain. "She's perfect," Cole said, tears in his eyes as he held his daughter for the first time. "Just like her mother." Elliot, allowed into the bedroom after the birth, approached his new sister with solemn curiosity that quickly gave way to protective pride. "I'll teach her everything, Mama," he promised, "just like Cole teaches me." The family settled into a new rhythm with Catherine's arrival. The baby thrived, growing strong through the winter months. Cole proved to be a devoted father to both children, patient with Elliot's endless questions and gentle with Catherine's middle-of-the-night demands. And true to his word, he wrote to Abigail every day. Sometimes the letters were short, just a line or two of appreciation, or a stolen moment of reflection during a busy day. Other times they were pages long, filled with observations about their children, plans for the ranch's future, or simply expressions of love that still made Abigail blush like a young girl. In return, Abigail wrote back faithfully, even on the hardest days when Catherine was fussy and ranch duties overwhelming. Their correspondence became a sacred practice, a daily renewal of the connection that had saved them both. Spring 1880 brought new prosperity to the ranch. The investment funds from Thomas's venture allowed them to purchase adjacent land when it became available, nearly doubling their holdings. Cole's expertise with cattle breeding yielded a stronger herd that commanded premium prices at market. Trinidad itself was changing, growing with the railroad's influence. New businesses opened, bringing more families to the area. Abigail found herself increasingly involved in community matters, particularly the establishment of a proper school to replace the one-room arrangement that had served the town for years. "You've become quite the civic leader," Cole teased one evening, finding her at the kitchen table surrounded by plans for a fundraising event. Abigail smiled up at him. "I never would have had the confidence without you. Your belief in me changed how I see myself." "You were always extraordinary," Cole said, leaning down to kiss her. "I just reminded you of it." Their second anniversary arrived in November 1880, celebrated quietly at home with the children. After Elliot and Catherine were asleep, Cole presented Abigail with a special gift, a beautiful wooden box, handcrafted and lined with velvet. "For our letters," he explained. "Past and future." Inside, Abigail found all the correspondence they had exchanged over the past 2 years, carefully preserved in chronological order. "You kept every one," she said, touched beyond words. "Of course I did. They're the story of us, Abby. How could I not keep them?" Abigail opened the drawer of her writing desk and removed a similar collection, all of Cole's letters to her, equally treasured. Together, they transferred them to the new box, their fingers occasionally brushing in a touch that still sent warmth through Abigail's body. "When did you know?" she asked suddenly. "That you loved me?" Cole considered the question, his expression thoughtful. I think it was your third letter to me. You wrote about Elliot falling into the creek and coming home covered in mud, and how instead of being angry, you joined him in splashing around because it had been so long since you'd heard him laugh. That's when I knew I was in trouble." Abigail laughed, remembering. "And for me, it was when you wrote about your mother's bread recipe and how you tried to make it for years but could never get it right. There was something so vulnerable in that admission from a man who seemed capable of doing anything." They stayed up late into the night, revisiting their early letters, reading passages aloud to each other, remembering the uncertainty and hope of those early days. "I want to make a promise," Cole said as they finally prepared for bed. "That no matter what happens, no matter how busy life gets or how many children we have or how successful the ranch becomes, we never stop writing to each other. Not ever." "I promise," Abigail agreed, sealing the vow with a kiss. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Their family grew with the birth of a son, James Thomas Rowland, in 1882, and twin girls, Emily and Elizabeth, in 1885. The ranch prospered under their joint management, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Elliot grew into a thoughtful young man with his mother's compassion and Cole's steady determination. At 16, he began taking on significant responsibilities at the ranch, showing a natural talent for the business side of operations that neither Abigail nor Cole possessed to the same degree. Catherine developed into a spirited girl with a love for books and animals, often disappearing for hours with a novel tucked under her arm, returning with observations about wildlife that impressed even Cole with their accuracy. Through it all, Abigail and Cole maintained their daily correspondence, adapting as life demanded but never abandoning the practice that had built the foundation of their relationship. Sometimes their letters crossed paths in the busy household. Cole's left on Abigail's pillow, while hers waited on his saddle, hers tucked into his lunch pail while his was slipped into her sewing basket. "The children think we're peculiar," Abigail remarked on their 10th anniversary, 1888, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, gray beginning to touch Cole's temples and laugh lines permanently etched around Abigail's eyes. "The children are right," Cole agreed with a smile. "We are peculiar, peculiarly fortunate to have found each other." Abigail leaned against his shoulder, content in the life they'd built. "Do you ever regret stopping in Trinidad, giving up your plans for Wyoming?" Cole's arm tightened around her. "Not for a single moment. Everything I was looking for, I found right here." Life in Trinidad continued to evolve as the 19th century drew to a close. The town grew more established, less frontier and more civilized with each passing year. The Rowland children attended a proper school in a building Abigail had helped to fund. The ranch expanded again, employing several hands year-round. In 1890, when Elliot turned 18, Cole and Abigail officially made him a partner in the ranch, recognizing his contributions and securing his future. "I couldn't be prouder if you were my own blood," Cole told him during the celebration dinner, emotion evident in his voice. Elliot, now a tall young man with his mother's auburn hair and serious expression, replied with equal emotion, "You are my father in every way that matters." That night, after the celebration, Cole wrote to Abigail about his pride in the young man Elliot had become, and his gratitude for being allowed to help raise him. "Of all the blessings in my life," he wrote, "being accepted as a father by a child who had every reason to resent my presence ranks among the greatest." Abigail's response the next morning acknowledged his role in Elliot's development. "You showed him what a man of integrity looks like, how a husband should treat his wife, how a father guides without controlling. Whatever good qualities he possesses, many can be traced directly to your influence." The turn of the century brought new technologies to Trinidad and to the Rowland Ranch. Telephones were installed in town, a development that Catherine, now a young woman of 20, found particularly exciting. "Imagine being able to talk to someone miles away, instantly," she marveled at dinner one evening in 1900. "I prefer letters," Cole said with a wink at Abigail. "Some things are better expressed in writing." "You two and your letters, James," their 18-year-old son said with good-natured exasperation. "The whole county knows about them." It was true. Over the years, the story of how Cole and Abigail's relationship had begun through daily letters had become something of a local legend. Young couples in Trinidad were sometimes given writing paper as a wedding gift, a nod to the Rowlands' enduring tradition. The early 1900s brought marriages for their children. Elliot was the first, wedding a schoolteacher named Sarah in 1902. Catherine followed in 1904, marrying the son of a Denver businessman she'd met during a cattle sale. James and the twins took longer, but by 1910, all the Rowland children had established homes of their own, though Elliot and his growing family remained at the ranch, gradually taking over more of its management. Through these changes, Abigail and Cole's letter writing continued, evolving to reflect their stage of life. They wrote of their pride in their children, their hopes for their grandchildren, their memories of the early days at the ranch. Sometimes they wrote of their aging bodies, the aches and limitations that time imposed, but never with bitterness, only gratitude for each day they shared. In 1913, 35 years after Cole had first arrived at the ranch, they celebrated their anniversary with a gathering of all their children and grandchildren, a noisy, joyful event that filled the expanded ranch house with laughter and life. That night, after everyone had departed or settled into guest rooms, Cole presented Abigail with a special gift, a new wooden box, larger than the first, to hold the decades of letters they had exchanged. "The first one ran out of space years ago," he explained, showing her how the new box was divided into sections by year, their entire married life organized in handwritten pages. All these words, Abigail marveled, running her fingers over letters from the 1880s. A whole life captured in ink. "The best kind of wealth," Cole agreed, taking her hand. At 61, Abigail's auburn hair had faded to a soft gray, and at 66, Cole moved more slowly than he once had. But their eyes still lit up in each other's presence, and their letters still spoke of love and desire, alongside the practical matters of ranch life and family. The years that followed brought the sorrows and joys that come with a long life. They lost friends, welcomed more grandchildren, watched the world change with automobiles and airplanes and a terrible war in Europe that took some of Trinidad's sons. Through it all, they wrote. Even when arthritis made Abigail's hands ache and Cole's eyesight required stronger spectacles each year, they maintained their daily correspondence, sometimes just a few lines, but always a connection renewed. In 1926, Cole suffered a mild heart attack that terrified Abigail and brought all their children hurrying back to the ranch. He recovered, but the episode forced them to confront their mortality more directly than they had before. "I'm not ready to lose you," Abigail wrote while Cole was still confined to bed. "Not after 48 years, not after everything we've built." His response, penned in a shakier hand than usual, reassured her. "You won't lose me, my love, not really. Even when I'm gone, I'll be in every corner of this ranch, in the faces of our children and grandchildren, in every letter I've ever written you. Love like ours doesn't simply disappear." Cole recovered enough to resume most activities, though he finally relinquished the day-to-day management of the ranch entirely to Elliot and James. He and Abigail settled into a quieter routine, enjoying visits from grandchildren and great-grandchildren, watching Trinidad continue to evolve into a modern town far removed from the frontier settlement Abigail had known as a young bride. In November 1928, they celebrated their golden wedding anniversary, 50 years of marriage, of partnership, of daily letters. The celebration was held at the ranch, attended by generations of Rowlands and many Trinidad residents whose lives had been touched by the couple over the decades. As a surprise, their children had collected excerpts from Cole and Abigail's letters over the years, those they were willing to share, and created a bound volume as an anniversary gift. Selections were read aloud during the celebration, charting the course of their extraordinary love story from its unusual beginning to the present day. "From tragedy came the greatest blessing of my life," Cole said, raising a toast to his wife before the assembled guests. "Abigail gave me a home when I was wandering, purpose when I was lost, love when I thought it wasn't meant for me. Every letter I've written her has been, at its heart, a thank you for that gift." Abigail, eyes bright with tears, responded, "And every letter I've written has been, at its heart, a celebration of the man who promised to write me every day and kept that promise through 50 years of changes. Cole taught me what real partnership looks like, what it means to be truly heard and valued. Whatever time we have left, I will spend it grateful for the day he stopped at our gate looking for work." They lived 3 more years in relative health and contentment, watching the world change around them while their own rituals remained constant. The stock market crashed, bringing hardship to many, but the Rowland Ranch, diversified and well managed by the next generation, weathered the economic storm. Cole Rowland passed away peacefully in his sleep in April 1932, at the age of 84. The night before, he had written his final letter to Abigail, placing it on her pillow as had been their custom for decades. She found it in the morning when she realized he was gone, his body still warm beside her. "My dearest Abigail," it began, "I feel a strange tiredness tonight that makes me think my time may be drawing near. I'm not afraid. How could I be, after a life so blessed? You found me when I was a drifter with little to offer but willing hands and a troubled past. You gave me a family, a purpose, a home. Every day with you has been a gift I never deserved but treasured beyond measure. If these are my last words to you, know that loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Until we meet again, I remain always yours, Cole." Abigail held the letter to her heart as she called for Elliot, who now lived in the main house with them. There were tears, of course, but also a profound sense of gratitude for the long, full life Cole had lived and the love they had shared. The entire town of Trinidad turned out for Cole Rowland's funeral. He was buried on the ranch land he had helped to build, on a hill overlooking the valley where he and Abigail had created their legacy. After the mourners had departed, Abigail sat alone by the fresh grave, the last letter in her hands. "I will write to you every day," she promised, her voice steady despite her grief. "Just as you wrote to me, our conversation isn't over, my love," and so she did. Every morning for the next 5 years, Abigail wrote to Cole, telling him about their grandchildren's accomplishments, changes to the ranch, her memories of their life together. She kept the letters in a special box beside the collection of their correspondence, a one-sided conversation that brought her comfort. Abigail Rowland lived until 1937, passing peacefully at the age of 85, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. In her final days, she asked Catherine to bring her writing desk to her bedside, and with trembling hands, she penned one last letter to Cole. "My beloved husband," she wrote, "I believe I'll be joining you soon. What a grand reunion we'll have, with so much to tell each other after these years apart. Until then, know that our story has been told and retold, that our children and their children understand the gift we shared. Love like ours never truly ends. It lives on in every letter, every memory, every life we touch together. Wait for me, my love. I'm coming home." After Abigail's death, the boxes of letters became a treasured family heirloom, passed down through generations of Rowlands. The ranch remained in family hands, a testament to the foundation Cole and Abigail had built together. In Trinidad, their story became part of local lore, the tale of a grieving widow whose unread letters to her first husband led to an unexpected love with a drifting cowboy who promised to write her every day, and kept that promise for more than 50 years. Their great-granddaughter, a professor of American history at a Colorado university, eventually edited a selection of the letters for publication in 1978, 100 years after Cole and Abigail's story began. The book, titled Then I'll Write You Every Day, became a quiet bestseller, touching readers with its portrayal of a love built on genuine communication and respect during a time when such partnerships were rare. In the introduction, she wrote, "My great-grandparents' story begins with letters unread and uncherished. It transforms through letters written and treasured daily for over half a century. In an age of instant communication, their dedication to putting thoughts on paper, to taking time with words, stands as a reminder of love's patient nature and the power of being truly heard." The last display in the Trinidad Historical Museum features a single framed letter the first Cole ever wrote to Abigail alongside a faded photograph of them on their 50th anniversary, surrounded by their large family. The caption reads simply, "Cole and Abigail Rowland, whose letters to each other became their legacy, proving that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a promise kept." And in the Rowland family cemetery on the ranch that still bears their name, Cole and Abigail lie side by side under a shared headstone. Visitors often leave pens or small notebooks as tributes, continuing the tradition of written words that define their extraordinary love.